Hello. I've realized that I've gone and made several videos expecting people to listen to what I have to say without really telling you much about me, who I am, where I come from, how I became an atheist, and so on. So, I guess I should do that. This is me, a young kid made of straw. As you can imagine, I got picked on a lot growing up. The girls didn't like me, the boys bullied me for being so different. I didn't understand why. I was nice to them as often as I could be, but no matter how hard I tried, the other kids just didn't like me. After a while, I gave up trying to make friends and found myself retreating into my own world. I started reading a lot, anything I could get my hands on. My favorite was fiction. I loved stories. Of those stories, the ones I fell in love with the most were fantasy. Stories of knights, wizards, ogres, dragons, and heroes saving the day. It wasn't long before I started writing my own stories. I was still very young when I started writing. I wrote stories about kids like me, the outcasts, and how they overcame the stigma of being different to become the hero, to become loved by everyone in the kingdoms of my imagination. I created worlds that didn't exist. But in my childhood naivete, I had hopes that one day, one of my worlds would become real, and I could go live in it as the hero king. One Sunday morning, my parents got me up early. I was none too happy about this because I had spent a good portion of the evening immersed in one of my books. They said we were going to church. I knew that church was where people went to talk to God, but not much else about the place, so I instantly became curious. Fear overcame my curiosity as soon as we got there, though, because all the kids were shuffled off to something they were calling Sunday school. I had school 5 days a week and prized my weekends, and here they were putting me in school on a Sunday. As soon as it started, however, I was instantly hooked. Sunday school was little more than story time. The teacher told us fantastic stories about a man building a boat that he filled with animals, and another story about a man who was swallowed whole by a whale and spat out 3 days later. One man she talked about a lot was a guy named Jesus. Jesus was a wizard, I could tell. He walked on water, healed sick people, fed a bunch of people with just a couple of fish and some bread that he magically turned into baskets full of food. I liked Jesus and planned to write my own stories about him as soon as I got home. On the drive home, my parents asked me what I thought about church. I told them that I loved it. To me, church was a place for people to get together and tell stories. I knew what I had to do. The entire following week, I spent every moment I could writing a story about Jesus. Jesus was the hero, of course, and in my story he could turn into a dragon and breathe fire and fly. He saved a town from bandits and brought a little boy who had been nearly killed back from the brink of death. A little boy made of straw. Jesus then made that little boy his partner in saving people. And they went around the whole world saving nice people and punishing bad people. They especially liked punishing bullies. I was up and ready for church the next Sunday before my parents even had the chance to wake me up. I was going to read my story about Jesus to the entire Sunday school class. I knew that it was good. I knew that if they liked my story, they would like me. And I knew they would like my story about Jesus. It was better than the teacher's stories. Hers were good, but tended to be short and followed by a boring discussion about the meaning of the story. I wasn't interested in all that. As soon as we got to church, I ran to the Sunday school teacher and told her that I had written about me and Jesus becoming friends and wanted to read my story to the class. She told me I could, and I nearly wet myself with excitement. I went to the bathroom and made sure my shirt was tucked in nice, that my tie was straight, even though it was a clip-on. I had seen on TV the men always fiddling with their tie to make it look good. With a quick check of my teeth to make sure I didn't have any food stuck in them, I dashed out of the bathroom and into the Sunday school class. I was ready to share my story. I was ready to finally make some friends who liked stories as much as I did. I was ready to be the hero. When the time came and the teacher called me up to the front of the class, I was ready. I stood there with my page-and-a-half story and read it out loud, only making a few nervous mistakes. When I was done, I looked up at the class and the teacher. It started with just a snort, then a giggle, and soon the whole class was laughing. The teacher silenced them quickly. I didn't understand. I knew my story was good. I knew that it was better than hers. But the kids laughed at it. They laughed at me. I ran out crying. The teacher came after me and asked me why I wrote that story. I told her that her stories had inspired me, but I knew I could make Jesus be an even bigger hero. Then she said the one thing that would change how I looked at church for the rest of my life. "But your story isn't true," she said. "Yeah," I replied. "The stories I told are true. They come from the Bible," she said. I just stared at her, dumbfounded. After the initial confusion, I grew angry. My parents had drugged me to a place full of bullies and liars. I did the only thing my young mind could come up with. "Liar," I yelled. Her stories were just like the one I wrote. Her stories were just like the ones I read in books. How could they possibly be true? I told her that the whale guy was stolen from Pinocchio, so I knew it was make-believe. I told her that no one could walk on water, that no one could feed a bunch of people with just 2 fish and some bread. I was getting louder and louder in my protests. My parents soon came to the hall where I was screaming and crying and took me to the car, apologizing to her, the liar, for what I was doing. They took me home. I rode in silence, too angry, too sad to even talk to my parents. When we got home, my dad sat me down in the dining room and told me I was very bad for what I had done. I told him that she lied to me, and she was the one who was bad. He told me that she did not lie, that Jesus really did the things that she said he had done. He could see the doubt on my face. He knew that I could not believe it, that I had read too many storybooks, or that they waited too long to take me to church. He was heartbroken, and I could see the sadness in his eyes. I didn't know why it was so important to him that I believed the stories from Sunday school, but I knew that if I wanted to stop making him sad, I needed to believe them. So, I did. Not really, but I managed to pretend that I did. I apologized to the Sunday school teacher. I told them that I had not understood the stories, or that Jesus was a real person. I did not understand that Jesus was a man who was sent to save my soul. Church had become a place of misery for me. It was no longer a place for stories, but a place for lies. I was good at lying. I got so good, in fact, that I eventually convinced myself. As I got older, I still kept writing, still kept reading. I developed an interest in other kinds of writing. I wrote plays, and found a love of poetry as well. The book of Psalms was my favorite book in the Bible. I would read it all the time. When I got done, I'd read it again. I tried to write poems better than the ones in the Bible, poetry that praised God. I didn't read much else of the Bible. I didn't need to. Every Sunday we went to church, and they would read it to us, and they would tell us what it means. And so I kept getting older, kept going to church. I graduated high school, got a job, moved out of my parents' house, and lived my life as best I could. I soon stopped going to church, but I still believed, still read the book of Psalms at least once a week, and still wrote my stories, plays, and poetry. Several years went by while I lived this way. I had bounced from job to job, never finding anything that could keep my interest. In fact, the only thing to ever keep my interest was reading, writing, and the book of Psalms in the Bible. It was when I realized that my biggest accomplishment since graduating high school was getting a car that I knew I needed to do something with my life, something big. So I started college. I was 30 when I started college, and I was 30 when I started reading more of the Bible than the book of Psalms. I became obsessed with the Bible, reading it almost more than my textbooks. As I read, I started to ask questions. The most prominent question was why none of the churches I had ever gone to told me about certain parts, big parts of the Bible. Why did they ignore certain things that screamed at me that what I believed was nonsense? Then it hit me. I was right. All those years ago, in that hallway, crying and yelling at the Sunday school teacher, I was right. I had been lied to my whole life. Not only by others, but I lied to myself. I remembered that talk at the table with my dad. I remembered why I had decided to tell him that I was sorry and that I believed. I remembered that I just wanted him to stop being sad. I was 30, I was a college student, and I had become an unbeliever again. I couldn't say atheist at the time. The stigma of the word just stung me. I kept lying, though. I kept the ruse going. I still do to this day with some people. I still, to this day, cannot tell my dad that I am an atheist. I started to feel guilty. Guilty about the lying, guilty about hiding. I knew that the Bible was nonsense. I knew that people who believed it were capable of immoral action. They think their God can do no evil, and therefore nothing the Bible says he did is evil. Well, I disagreed. I decided it was time to stop feeling guilty, time to start standing up for those like me, those who hide their atheism, or those who don't and are scorned, those who are still young and trapped in homes that would indoctrinate them into a life of believing lies. But I didn't know how to do this. After a while, I discovered YouTube. No, I wasn't living in the dark. I knew YouTube was there, and in fact had a gaming channel that I ran. What I discovered was the YouTube atheist community. I saw that online atheism had the strength. Religion was beaten back every time. Religious liars were shown to be the frauds and con artists and greedy opportunists that they are. Every time some religious person would challenge science or atheism, they get pounced upon with reason, logic, and critical thinking. I had found my battleground. I had found the place where I could spread reason and critical thought. There was one problem. My dad. He watches some of those online preachers. He sees them respond to some of the prominent atheists on YouTube. So I would need to keep my real identity secure as I possibly could. It was when I saw a video made by the Armored Skeptic that I knew how I could still join the fight against irrationality, religious dogma, and oppression. That little boy made of straw had grew into a man. He stole the Christian title of saint, not to mock them, but to show them that a saint, an overwhelmingly good person, is not someone who spreads lies, but a person who spreads truth, unadulterated, uncensored, raw truth. Though it is a play on the term straw man, it has more meaning than that. Saint Rawman was born, and he was angry.